Formula One is collapsing, and the drivers are the ones exposing it. Not the media. Not the fans. The drivers. Verstappen says it doesn't feel like Formula One. Hamilton says it's too complex for anyone to follow. Alonso says the driver doesn't even matter anymore. That's not criticism. That's a complete loss of confidence. And it's happening because of something that should never exist in this sport. Cars are now slowing down, on full throttle. Right in the middle of a straight. Losing up to 50 kilometers per hour, with zero warning. And when one car loses that speed, and another doesn't, the difference can explode past 40 kilometers per hour, instantly. That's not racing. That's a ticking risk. It already caused a near disaster that proved everything the drivers warned about. And now the FIA is in emergency meetings, with 6 different solutions on the table, just to stop this from getting worse. But here's the part that changes everything. This didn't surprise anyone inside Formula One. The drivers predicted it. They explained it. They warned about it, before the season even began. And they were ignored. So now there's only one question left. Did Formula One just create a system so broken, even its own drivers can't save it? At first, it didn't look like a disaster. It looked like the future. A smarter Formula One. More efficient. More advanced. Built for a new era. That was the promise. An engine split perfectly in half. 50% electric power. 50% combustion. A bold concept that everyone believed in. Teams invested in it. Manufacturers committed to it. The FIA pushed it forward with confidence. And on paper, it was perfect. Balanced. Innovative. Unstoppable. But Formula One is not decided on paper. It's decided on track. At full speed. Under pressure. With drivers pushing everything to the limit. And that's exactly where everything started to fall apart. Because while the electric power was massively increased, the battery wasn't. It stayed exactly the same. Same capacity. Same limits. But now, under extreme demand, that single decision changed everything. Because it created a system that cannot sustain itself. At full deployment, the battery drains in seconds. 8 to 10 seconds, and it's completely empty. And when that happens, the car changes instantly. Not gradually. Not predictably. Instantly. The system switches from delivering power to recovering energy. Even if the driver is still flat on the throttle. That moment is where Formula One breaks. Because from that point on, the driver is no longer fully in control. The system takes over. And that creates something this sport has never seen before. Unpredictable performance in the middle of a straight. Think about that. A driver is pushing at maximum speed. And suddenly, the car stops behaving the way it should. Not because of skill. Not because of setup. Because the energy is gone. And now the car is trying to recharge itself, while still racing. That's the core of the disaster. But here's where it becomes even more extreme. Drivers are already adapting. Not by pushing harder, but by slowing down. They lift off early. On straights. Before the braking zone. Not to defend. Not to attack. But to recharge the battery, before the system forces them to slow down even more. So they slow down, to avoid being slowed down harder later. That contradiction is the clearest proof something is fundamentally broken. And it changes everything about the sport. Because this is no longer about pushing to the limit. It's about managing a system. Managing energy. Managing timing. Managing something invisible, but decisive. And when that happens, the essence of Formula One starts to disappear. But this is only the beginning. Because the real danger starts when another car is involved. Everything changes the moment another car enters the equation. Because this system doesn't just fail. It creates imbalance. One driver exits a corner with a full battery. Another exits with almost nothing left. Same track. Same lap. Completely different performance. At first, it looks normal. Both cars accelerate. Both drivers commit. But then, it happens. One car keeps pulling. The other suddenly stops gaining speed. Not gradually. Instantly. That's super clipping. And in that exact moment, the gap between them doesn't just increase. It explodes. We're talking about differences of 40, even 50 kilometers per hour, in seconds. Now imagine you're the driver behind. Flat out. Focused. Everything feels under control. Until suddenly, it isn't. The car in front is slower than expected. Much slower. And there is no warning. No signal. No pattern. No way to predict it. Just a car, losing speed where it should be fastest. That's not racing. That's survival. And this is exactly what turned frustration into fury. Because this already happened. Suzuka. A car ahead enters super clipping. loses around 30 to 40 kilometers per hour, almost instantly. Another car arrives at full speed. The closing gap is massive. There is almost no time to react. The driver behind swerves, avoids contact. By meters. Just meters. And that moment changes everything. Because now, this is not theory. This is reality. This is the danger the drivers warned about from the beginning. Not just performance issues. Safety. Because this is the part the FIA didn't fully account for. Not how the system works alone, but how it behaves in traffic. Because Formula One is not about driving in isolation. It's about fighting. Wheel to wheel. Corner to corner. And that requires one thing above everything else. Trust. Drivers push to the limit because they trust the car. They trust the response. They trust the speed. They trust what happens when they go flat out. But now, that trust is gone. Because the car can change behavior without warning. Not based on skill. Not based on input. Based on energy. Invisible. Unpredictable. Constantly changing. And when that trust disappears, everything becomes dangerous. Drivers hesitate. Or worse, they commit and the car responds differently than expected. That's when mistakes happen. That's when accidents happen. And that's when the sport crosses a line it was never supposed to cross. But here's what makes this even worse. This wasn't hidden. This wasn't impossible to predict. The drivers saw it coming. They warned about it before the season even started. They described exactly this scenario. And still, nothing changed. Which is why the reaction now is different. This isn't normal frustration. This is anger. Because the drivers are not just dealing with a flawed system. They are dealing with a system that they were forced to race after warning it was dangerous. And now there's a question that no one inside Formula One can avoid anymore. If the drivers don't trust the cars, how long before the entire sport starts losing control? The FIA had no choice. Not anymore. Not after the data. Not after the near disaster. Not after every driver said the same thing. So everything changed. Fast. Emergency meetings were called. Manufacturers were pulled in. Teams were forced to bring answers, not excuses. And for the first time, the FIA stopped defending the rules and started trying to contain them. That shift says everything. Because Formula One doesn't react like that unless something is already out of control. Now there are 6 different solutions on the table. 6 different ways to try and save the sport from itself. But here's the problem. None of them fix the real issue. Every single one is a compromise. One of the most urgent ideas targets something very specific. The reason drivers are lifting off on the straight. Right now, lifting off allows the car to recover more energy than staying flat on the throttle. Which means drivers are being rewarded for going slower. So the solution seems simple. Make energy recovery equal, whether the driver lifts or not. Remove the advantage. Remove the behavior. Make the straights feel normal again. But even that doesn't solve everything. Because super clipping still exists. It just becomes less aggressive. Another solution goes deeper. Reduce the electric power when the battery gets too low. Stretch the energy. Avoid the sudden drop in speed. Make everything more predictable. But again, there's a cost. Less power. Less acceleration. Less of that raw intensity that defines Formula One. And suddenly, the entire debate changes. Because now the question isn't how to make the cars faster. It's how to make them safer. And that shift changes everything. Because once safety becomes the priority, it means performance has already failed. And that's why Formula One is in serious trouble. Not just because something is broken, but because fixing it changes what the sport is supposed to be. Make it safer, and it becomes slower. Keep it fast, and it stays unpredictable. There is no perfect solution, only trade-offs. And here's the hardest truth of all. This cannot be fully fixed this season. Because the real problem is built into the design itself. The batteries are too small. The power demand is too high. That balance is locked. And you cannot rebuild that in the middle of a championship. So what happens now? The season continues. With patches. With temporary fixes. With small adjustments trying to control a massive flaw. Which means every race from this point forward is not just competition. It's an experiment. Drivers adapting. Teams reacting. The FIA trying to stay ahead of something that might already be ahead of them. And that leads to the question no one inside Formula One wants to answer. Is the FIA still in control of the sport? Or is the sport now reacting to a mistake that was too big to fix from the start? And this is where the crisis becomes irreversible. Because now, it's no longer just about performance. It's about identity. Behind closed doors, the conversation has already changed. Quietly, but completely. This is no longer about fixing the rules. It's about fixing what Formula One has become. Teams are no longer asking how to go faster. They're asking how to bring the sport back. Because something fundamental has been lost. Drivers are no longer racing the limit. They are managing it. Managing energy. Managing systems. Managing something invisible that decides everything. And when the driver stops being the center of the sport, everything starts to collapse. Because Formula One has always been built on one simple idea. The best driver, in the fastest car, pushing beyond what should be possible. But now, that idea is fading. Drivers are lifting on straights. Cars are losing speed without warning. Performance is no longer consistent, even within the same lap. And fans can see it. They can feel it. Even if they don't fully understand it. Because something doesn't look right. Something doesn't feel like Formula One. And that perception is more dangerous than any technical failure. Because once fans stop believing in what they're watching, the damage goes far beyond one season. And this is why everything now points to the future. 2027. Not as an evolution. As a reset. A complete reset. Because the lesson from this disaster is now impossible to ignore. If you increase electric power, the battery must increase with it. If systems become more complex, they must remain predictable. And most importantly, the driver must always be in control. Because the moment the system overrides the driver, Formula One stops being Formula One. But here's the final truth. The one everything has been building toward. Even if the FIA fixes the rules, even if the cars become predictable again, even if the drivers regain full control, there is one question that will never go away. How did this happen? Because this wasn't hidden. The data was there. The warnings were clear. The drivers said it from the very beginning. And still, nothing changed. Which means the real problem is not just the regulation. It's the decision-making behind it. The process that allowed it. The system that approved it, without fully understanding the consequences. And if that doesn't change, then this won't be the last crisis. It will be the first of many. Because Formula One is now at a crossroads. One path leads to more complexity. More systems. More control taken away from the driver. The other path brings the sport back to its core. Speed. Precision. Human control at the absolute limit. But there is no guarantee which path will be chosen. And that uncertainty is the real danger. Because for the first time in years, Formula One doesn't just look unstable. It feels uncertain. Uncertain about its identity. Uncertain about its direction. Uncertain about its future. And that leads to the final question. Not about this season. Not about the rules. About the entire future of the sport. Is Formula One still in control of where it's going? Or has it already created something that even the best drivers in the world can no longer control?